Let's rock on, yeah! Good to see everybody tonight. My name is Hrastovec, and I'm the backup host tonight because Marty Gervais couldn't be here. His wife just recently had some surgery. She's doing fine, but he had to be there with his family tonight. So he sends his regards to the lovely town of Amherstburg and people from all around, wherever you're from. Is everybody from Amherstburg here? Some people from Windsor, I think, too, right? So Amherstburg, Aber. Great little town. It's amazing what's going on here. And I love this bookstore because this bookstore was founded during the pandemic. Wasn't that amazing? So thanks to Richard Petty, and his wife's name is?
Colleen.
Colleen and Richard Petty. We're doing some dynamic things here in this community because they understand community, right? That's what it's all about, community. Just like the community of people that are here today, community of writers, book lovers, all of us, joining together. So we thank them for this wonderful space. And we also thank the indigenous peoples who first founded this place. And we think of them in our hearts, and we know that this is sacred ground. We also know that this is sacred ground because there's a beautiful Freedom Museum somewhere, I'm pointing right way back that way, that I went to as a young lad because my father knew the fellow, whose name escapes me for the moment, who started the museum because they worked together at the hospital back in the day. And my father said, I'm taking you to a place where you're going to learn something. And isn't that amazing? And we thank again for all of our forefathers and our foremothers, those who came before us, wherever they came, the Underground Railroad, those who came by way of Pier 21, all of us who came to work with the indigenous peoples to a land that we all sacredly hold as free for all of us, and may it always be so. We think of those who, of course, are undergoing lots of strain in Europe, and the Ukraine especially. And we understand how freedom is important for all of us. So I just wanted to say those things by way of introduction, only because we were talking earlier about books, and books that allow us that we enjoy books, we enjoy words, and all of us as freedom lovers and lovers of books, of course, we're opposed to censorship, and that's why we're here. We're here to uphold the beauty of art and literature. So I want to thank Cindy and Lori who are here tonight, purveyors of books here at this great bookstore. And I want to thank Julian at the back from Black Moss Press who's here, and she's videotaping this. And we're going to get underway here and hopefully have you enjoy the evening in short order. So again, my name is Peter Hrastovec, but I am here, and again, Marty sends his regards and his regrets, but he put together a program tonight along with Julian of 4 writers who I think you'll find interesting. Put me at the bottom rung of the ladder. I'm really excited about the people that we're going to introduce here tonight. And it is my great privilege to introduce a wonderful, wonderful writer who's going to start off the show here. Dr. André Narbonne. Yes, Dr. André Narbonne, who is not just a prolific writer and a great teacher. His students love him. And as I said to him today, I talked to some of the students last night. We had a launch at the Windsor Club last night, just the 2 of us, in our books. And the student said to me, Dr. Narbonne walks on water. And I said, well, that's pretty cool because in a previous life he was a sailor, and that's a good thing to be able to do if you walk on water. And he'll talk about that in a little bit. But he started off as a marine engineer, and he'll tell you the story about that. I won't steal any of his thunder, but he graduated at Georgian College with that. Then he sailed as a marine engineer on bulk carriers, just up and down this fantastic waterway, right? And he worked in fishery patrol and hydrographic vessels and tankers before attending university, where he completed a BA Honors and an MA at Dalhousie University. And he was the Killam Scholar. That's a pretty cool thing, at that university. And his PhD in Canadian Literature at the University of Western Ontario. That's why we call him Doctor. And he was the recipient of the SSHRC Doctoral Fellowship in 2000-2003. He served as the executive of the Association of Canadian and Quebec Literatures and was the committee chair at the Gabriel Roy Prize for Criticism in Canadian Literature. He's a former chair of the Halifax chapter of the Canadian Poetry Association, and his short stories won the Atlantic Writing Competition, the Free Fall Prose Contest, and the David Adams Richards Prize, and we're anthologizing best Canadian stories. Like, you know, you go right to the top, best Canadian stories. This guy right here, he's one of those people that are acknowledged in that way, and that's fantastic. He's also the fiction editor of the Windsor Review, so anybody who likes to write fiction, give it a shot. Send it into the, go on the website, and who knows what might happen. You know, if it's a great piece of work, you know, you may be up here reading someday soon, and we hope you have that great opportunity. He's going to talk about his new book tonight, but I want to point out that this book of short stories, 12 Miles to Midnight, came out a few years ago. Absolutely stunning. You know, if you want to read something, and think about this, folks, not just pick up the book for yourself. I always like picking up copies of books and bringing them to people's houses instead of a bottle of wine. Sometimes with a bottle of wine when you go to dinner, because the bottle of wine will be consumed in you know, maybe that night or in a few days. But this book may, you know, change hands 2, 3, 4 times and bring lots of pleasure to people. And that's the legacy of literature. And you could do that too, just for a few dollars, you know, a gift that keeps on giving, as I like to say. But he's also going to be here talk about, you know, not only his experience as a writer, but talk about his new novella, a marvelously charming story of romance on the sea, or the lakes, as I should say. There's no better way to describe it. Lucien and Olivia, a beautiful little book that again was just launched yesterday. And with no further ado, I give you the amazing Dr. André Narbonne.
I'm going to give you this book in 2 passages, I think, but I'm going to actually read a little bit also from this book that I didn't write. And I'm going to explain that. But this book, I started this book in 2015. And I'll just give you this as background. I started this book because I was uncomfortable with the political situation. I was uncomfortable with the political discourse. And this is a political book that never mentions politics. This book is in a response to the transactional view of relations. This book is about people who have to imagine each other. It's about a marine engineer at sea in the 80s, and he does something that no marine engineer ever wants to do in the 80s. He falls in love. So it's 3 months at sea, 1 month at home, and he falls in love. He realizes he's in love when he starts writing letters to this girl at home. This woman he's met, Olivia, who is a philosophy major at Dalhousie University. He's at sea. And he's writing her letters. And the 80s is a time when communication doesn't really happen well. If you're at sea, you're writing letters. Occasionally, if you're in port, you might go to a payphone, but it's really, really dicey. Because if you call and nobody picks up, then you've got the whole next trip to imagine why the phone wasn't picked up. And that's what Lucien has to do, and he has to imagine Olivia. And this story book is about people whose value, whose own self-worth is tied up to the way that they imagine other people. Who are you, or what do you imagine? I think the Beatles, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Well, who are you, well, what do you make of other people? What do you find in other people? And this is a story that happens at sea. It's a sailing story, but it's really a love story. And it's about how we know each other, and knowing each other, know ourselves. So, well, I'm going to read passages that I didn't write. And I'm going to do that because when I was in college, my best friend used to feed me because I wasn't good with money. And he'd say, André, why don't you come over and you can eat? And he would give me his father's beer. His father made this homemade beer that was just like it would knock you out. If you could drink one and stand, that was pretty good. So that was my friend York Albert. And I wanted to write about the first ship he'd been on. I wanted that to be one of the ships in my story, the Sioux River Trader. I had never sailed on it. I could describe the ship. I could describe it perfectly. But I got in touch with York and I said, what did it smell like? Because here's a triple expansion engine. And anyone can describe a ship from the outside, but who can describe what a triple expansion engine smells like in the engine room? So I sent York this email, and he wrote back, and here's what he wrote, and I shamelessly plagiarized him. I do thank him. Yeah, maybe Olivia is right. Listening to the voice of the Sioux River Trader, he's as good as there. And here's York's voice. He finds the sounds systematically artful. No, that's me. The remembered smells, lube oil cooked by steam leaking through packing glands in the main engine, and a multitude of ancillary reciprocating pumps. That's straight from Jörg's email. I mention that because Jörg's mother is here today. This is where Jörg grew up. So to give you this in two passages, two brief passages. First passage is going to walk through. At the beginning of the book, we find Lucien in a state of dismay. He has jumped ship at Lock 3, gone down to Lock 1 in the Mullen Canal. So he's right there by Lake Ontario. And he's done that, he's cabbed down so that he can get on the phone. Because he has been writing to Olivia for 1 month and not getting a response. Now, the only way you get a response is if the mail comes to Lock 3 and the ship's in Lock 3. But he got off at Lock 3 and went to Lock 1. And there's been no mail, and he's been writing long letters. He's been writing long letters that he has been sending, and he keeps thinking, these are so dull. She's not going to be interested in it. Because he's just writing about what's happening around him. He's trying to tell her who he is through these quotidian things. So he gets off at Lock 1, he's going to call her, and he finds that the payphone has been cut. And so he smashes it. And that's how we meet him. So he's waiting there, and all the ships are going by, and finally his ship comes, the Sioux River Trader goes by, and we have that passage, and he remembers his first ship, and then this other ship comes by that he's going to get on, and he gets on the ship, and we have this bit. Now he's been just thinking, look, when they left it, I'll just say one more thing, I'm talking a lot, she had told him, don't say you love me. Mostly they've been hanging out in bars reading at the same table. They've been reading Malcolm Lowry of all things, Under the Volcano. That's how they've gotten to know each other. Not really a romantic book. And they've known each other for 3 weeks. And at the airport, she saw him off the airport to go catch the ship. And she said, don't tell me you love me. I don't want it. And we find out later that it's because of a former boyfriend who was very abusive and used to tell her that he loved her all the time. And that's why he was being abusive. But he doesn't know that. All he knows is writing letters that have to end sincerely, Lucien. He gets back on the ship. Wandering into the afterhouse, he is met by the lurker, a 40-year-old chain smoker whose talent is for blowing smoke rings without having a cigarette in his hand. No one is ever impressed. Did you get your mail, says the lurker. What mail? From the post office at Lock 3. Missed it. Went ashore at Lock 3 to use the phone. Where is it? The cook said you were waiting for something and you put it in your cabin. That's considerate. The lurker makes a face. Whatever his real name is, no one on the ship uses it. He knew you'd wake him up if he did. Your hand bleeding? He checks. No, it stopped. In his cabin, Lucien finds the letter on his bed, an odd-shaped affair with Olivia's return address. He rips into it to find a hi-fi chromium dioxide cassette labeled Lucien, attempt number 3. He shifts the mess on his dresser, retrieves a Walkman, flips out a copy of Remain in Light, replacing it with Olivia's cassette. The batteries are dead. So then he walks through the ship and finally finds someone, it's dead at night, he finally finds someone who's got batteries. And he says, you can't buy the batteries from me because it's too hard to get batteries. You're going to have to replace the batteries with batteries. It's one of the things with the sailor, like giving stamps and just regular things with the helps. Business hours, super hard to do. You just have to put the ship down at the right time. So he goes into this man's cabin and he discovers that his cabin is adorned with all this pornographic images. So he's walking about looking for these batteries, and he comes back from this really grotesque imagery, this guy's idea of love. And he feels in the top dresser, finds the battery, then he's back in his cabin with its yellow-stained walls and the countless smokers who've held his rank and slept and awoken in his cot. He drops onto the lizard-green settee, bolted to the deck beneath the cabin's only porthole, pulls up his legs, crossing them under his body, the way schoolchildren sometimes sit at their desks when they've overcome their fear of the teacher. Eyes closed, he listens to Olivia's voice. On a 90-minute cassette, she has spoken 3 words. I love you. Now he's got a problem. How's he going to reply? So he's taxing himself. How do you reply to that? And he's been writing 20-page letters. And this is the last bit I'll read. I should warn you, my last book had no sex in it. It didn't sell very well. This book has sex on page 39. I'm reading from page 38. 3 a.m. and she hasn't answered her buzzer. So he's written something. He's written 4 words on an envelope, in a letter. That's it. He's going to reply with 4 words. That's what you have to find out what they are. One of the things in the book. So 3 a.m. she hasn't answered her buzzer. The ship just got into Halifax. It was a surprise. They leave Montreal and say, oh, we're going to go to Port Arthur. Contracts have changed. We're stopping in Halifax to load up with oil. There's been plenty of opportunity. He rings one last time, counts to 5. Then he's on the street, confused by an intermittent shadow thrown by a defective streetlight, the nodding acknowledgement of loss. The car whips past, its open windows emitting laughter, the smell of marijuana, the squeal of a balcony door wrenched open. He turns to a voice from above, Olivia. She is perched on the rail of her balcony, a hand cupped above her eyes to shade the rippling light. Lucien! Lucien? Hi, Olivia. When did you... How? I didn't know. I'm not ready. I couldn't tell you. I didn't find out we were coming until we left port. I'm sorry, should I go? Heavens, no, come up. She's waiting in the hall wearing a roots shirt that barely covers her. Oh, God, she says, I had no idea what I would feel. I mean, I had some idea. I mean, shut up. Just shut up. Who are you talking to? My brain. They are face to face in her apartment, a bachelor. The bed is most prominent furnishing. She's been woken up from her sleep, to judge by the disarray of the blankets and sheets, the indent on the pillow. She works her hands like she's rubbing a hard stain off her fingers. She says, I finished your book. My book. He dies, the ambassador. Of course, we infer that from the beginning. Olivia, you read such important books. Olivia, yes? It's been a very long time. We should kiss. Before he can make good on his words, she leans into him, tilts his head slightly with her hands up to the side to negotiate his nose, kisses gently, touchingly. The softness of her lips is impossible after everything that has bruised him over the past 2 months. He pulls her closer and kisses her hard. To hell with gentility, she laughs. I want you. I have to be back in time for watch. When's that? 8 o'clock? Olivia, are you awake? No, she keeps laughing pleasantly at her own confusion. She pulls her shirt off and throws it on the floor. 5 hours. Okay, let's fuck. It is the first time he has heard her swear. That's page 69. And these are people who could at any point cancel each other, but they imagine each other in such a way that they don't, and that's what's happening in this book. Now I want to introduce 2 former students, Jovan Stefanov and Nick Hildenbrand. What can I say about them? They're brilliant students. I taught their book in my class this year. I was really happy to do that. I had a class called on Windsor's literary culture. I forgot the name of my own class. It's been 2 weeks. And I taught their book, and at the end of the class, I gave as a possible optional bonus mark. Students could tell me which book they liked best. And Gord's here, I taught his book too. They pretty much, Gord wrote a novel and I taught it in the last 2 weeks, so it couldn't be better. But they picked Nick and Jovan for their lovely, lovely poetry. I know Nick and Jovan as students. One thing I notice with my students when they come into my office is what their cultural reach is. Some students don't know their parents' generation, they don't know their culture, and other students come in and it's really interesting because they can talk to me about things. And they can teach me things, and they can tell me things about, they have some sort of historical continuity with their own parents. And I'm always impressed by it. And that's what impresses me, one of the things that impresses me with Nick and Jovan. But I'm going to let them read now this fabulous book.
I'm Nick. Nice to meet you guys. Thanks for coming. I'm going to read some poems from the Marshwood songs. This book is essentially an attempt to capture both the history and the immediacy of our landscapes of southwestern Ontario. This is a book that traverses both the natural and industrial landscapes that we inhabit. And yeah, I'll start with a poem called Elegy on Hopperwoods. I wrote this the day before my 25th birthday. It's an attempt to immortalize a landscape which was really formative and which exists behind my house, this bush lot. I remember from my childhood seeing a manhole with the name Hopper Woods on it, and I tried to look it up in adulthood to see if I could find it as like a reference or like a historical name for this place, but I couldn't, so I thought I would try to immortalize this place in verse. It's a place that I used to explore quite extensively with my older family members and then eventually on my own. It deals with the inevitability of transience. And I was really troubled before my 25th birthday, and I decided to go and experience a landscape which was unfortunately being cut down, and it felt like my memories were also being cut down. So this is Elegy on Hopper Woods. My crumble leaf boot got stuck at the foot of your minaret, hounded by the aviary calling of my own name. Crying in the pond, art fart plodding and longing for a seat, pinching rivulets and wood striae, frond whistles and scrapes of whitened lilac pipe cane. Fisher bird, your intonation climbs now, I am rooted. I think of your bead and pedaled dreamcatcher composition, Little Coast anthem, walking on it, the refrain of jostled reeds, old timbre shell instrumentation, wind harp tide rack island, glorious remnants of large things, the footsteps of another who saw me and turned around. Lawless crescent in the water, touchable. I spit my cigarette filter at it. I remember where you said to me April 17th of this year, the sunburnt planks of some forgotten tree fort, an old manhole bearing faded leopard titles. I remember the hickory spindrift tombstone and the forest about 5 feet above the Ossian anther sprouts and the dirt also growing. The UB in our hearts nettled and capsized I never saw before. And that's that one. This next poem, thank you. This next poem is kind of similar. It's an attempt to immortalize this lookout called Petite Côte down Front Road. It's a place where me and my friends in undergrad would go and listen to music and watch the stars and smoke a little bit. It's basically an attempt to explore synchronicity, which is like the bread and butter of poets, and explore synchronicity as a temporal occurrence, and it kind of traverses back and forth between history, the present, and the future. It's questioning whether or not the perceiver is also being perceived by these synchronicities. But this is Petite Côte. Hasty old fox, what do you remember? I noticed your crossing sun-spread lope, your drooping tail of bedclothes in the driveway, your blue lumen simmer of winded ditch reed and lace, your lookout correcting my glasses and patting my neck with what is it? Your paths, the greenery of your black thumbprint and loom, on the perch, birdwing in the rain dust, stumbling back to my car, a woodwalk scavenger in the motley, tinkering with panels and broke fly leaves, digging at grass seeds in the muck with my dad's notebook in the nighttime bulrush. I followed your northward tracks to the riverside, to the recollection of a cottage, to a sailboat, to your overflowing mouth with dandelion and a tree root, flower cup and black trumpet coffee-laden, pitch-eyed, to bowstring hair and the diary of Cannon in a paper bag, to a translation of childhood visionary expeditions in the half-life forest. Old meander, I encountered you watching me there in the eventide stream. This next poem is from a series of trespass poems. There are multiple trespass poems in this book. Like I mentioned earlier, modernization is doing pretty terrible things to the landscape, I would say, that kind of nourished me. And every time I see that happen, it really, it feels like my memory is being cut up a little bit. So I started to engage in these trespass walks where, in order to find new locations of wilderness, I would have to trespass and walk on other people's, private properties and stuff. I wanted to experience that liberty of history, and that primordial feeling when you engage with the wilderness, when you engage with nature. And in order to do that, I had to break some laws, unfortunately. Sorry, parents. So this is one of those poems that captures that. Trespass poem number 100. This is also the 100th poem I actually have written. The name of that copse whose mallet I took, whose knot valleyed my knuckle with slight umber peaks, whose wand antenna cinnamon stick dits and daws, revealed me in dabbled patchflake tumults, sea spray and jangle thumping, honey gold I don't knows, an accord with your looks, an accord while watching the watercolor blushes of your sirs, an accord wasted and burning in love for scatter blue light, reciting declarant songs to UFOs or other autonomous suns, lying in the attentive vein of ringleted grass, and on your hip while history's fiddled with that wiring of my instrument a little, that signature of my eternal gait, traipsing in lawns and trudging in farm fields, charting the tread of muddled deer, and that man Adam just arriving baked with carbide headlamps showing gardens and attic corners with weird open-souled refractions and carpentry etchings of old West Town encampments, various masts punctured by woodpeckers, albatrosses, nocturnal bullfrog croonings by the creek, our cacophonous emergent selves we still held until the sun rose, chasing your illumined linseed effigy, our illumined trireme in the tree. This next poem is, it was written, this is the last poem I've actually written. It's another poem which deals with synchronicities, and it's an attempt to capture all of these synchronicities that surrounded me and this girl who, it was a very tumultuous relationship, but I had very strong feelings for the girl, and it's in essence a love poem. But it involves a lot of local scenery, I guess. This one's called What's Poppin' at Texas Road. I stumbled into quiescent speckle, into mahogany brick lampposts, All Saints' Day recurrence. I stumbled into third vision Obad, passing over Victory, lurching over Dougal, returning over Gary, into fresh boot scrape heel and Orphic mania, becoming conjunctive utterance reeling with the spirit of it, with a crossroad traversal, with a Milky Way wheel that domed my roundabout rig with cadences of softer fluorescence. As I trampled circles in slippers and feigned stepping into the graveyard, stopping instead at the blackened pitch threshold, head cocked to the wild croon of hounds baying in the woodlot. While I wrapped you in persimmony and chrysanthemum and the issuing ramble of candle wax, diffusing typewriters and crumpled burnt leaf paisley, as you expounded my cosmological feats to all those that wanted you. And in the dollar store ring, finding ancient particles revolving like lost gossamer on the bookshelf. And in my thrifted coat you donned as an oversized cape, hugging to me with hands that made the equilateral protuberance of blackened wingtips, or toppled angels, limping along in the cold wind like that liminal doe who's been following. On the inclined rift of broken bed frame you curled as the crescent moon, clutching my hands beneath your pit, with fingers pressed to the indelible pulse of your rising and falling. And that's it. that's all the time I have. So this guy's next. He's a great poet. Did I mention he's Macedonian?
Thanks, Nick. I want to thank both of the readers before me. I've learned a lot from the both of them coming together with Marshwood Songs and Nick. It's been quite an adventure. A lot of the poems here were written from my perspective from the city. So Nick is more or less in LaSalle. He has access to the big open spaces, places like Ojibwe, the bush lots, the fields, the wheat fields, the various farms where trespassing can occur. For me, I'm traversing through golf courses, I'm hopping the fence, I'm going places in the city. So, as Nick mentioned, I'm a writer of Macedonian heritage, and actually today we lost a good old member of a community, Dimitar Bashevsky, aka Brother Jimmy, and I thought I'd start off with an ode to another old guy I lost in October, my grandfather. So with that being said, I'll start with a poem called Pythagorean Hymn. When you walked me to school, the hollowness of my O, surprise of the bird-strung path, the soft sternness of your face, telling me to remember how ancients had no zero, and earth is a number reflection, and if you whistle close to water, waves met waves. I wish you waited for the physics of my song. Ditto. I miss the partisan geometry of your newfound plot. When did we last speak? Erratic, pixelated, an apartment hall, Nazi tunnel playpens, rations, your jail stay in Kiev, the years thrashing wood for power lines, like a St. Boniface of Tesla, to sit green-eyed as Caesar on the herbs of Lake Tifish, their hands as tusks, to the co-title of a built current. When you walked me to school, you told me 1944 was Bulgarians, but bullets were still speaking Turkish, and still speaking Turkish, your father was in the corpses. Simple math for simple shapes. Как страшно жизни силков. That's That being said, on a lighter note, I know we're in a Diageo neighborhood, I know we're in the Crown Royal city, we're in the place where people make the fine whiskeys and what have you, but I was a Hiram Walker employee last summer, and Hiram Walker, I wrote a poem called Hiram Walker, but my experiences there, essentially loitering, not doing very much physical work, but plenty of literary work, and I think those kind of experiences are important. And in the city, you can sometimes you can get lucky with a little job like that. But further ado, Hiram Walker. I'm learning Russian in the janitor's closet. Door open for the doused barrel machine tap at Oakjo. The chest harmony of department drain fill. My cloister rumbles with new antiquity. Emily writes me Essex prints from her Saskatoon rail yard. Nick hums me his machines over the phone. 10,000 miles away in Moscow, Maria translates her Turgenev in the same breath as Jake shows me the maple barrels, soaked and charred for designer rye that'll survive its blenders like blenders before. And Dr. Livermore stacks Albion seed subterranean 10, 20, 30 years until emerging glass from a cosmic crevice in Tecumseh it founds how many stupors from Promethean wood, how many drunks made, kids conceived, friends incurred, all from the witness of my barrel. St. Paul says to take a little wine for your gut, for your spirit the spirit. Distillery walk amongst shroud pipelines, liquor words from the mash of river and heat. I bellow the myth and myrrh of your grain pressure. I'm singing it noosed from its million sips, how color blooms in laboratory centrifuge and spills lapless on bar stools, soaking and seeping into wood like the tomb of an old tsar, and lives again and again and again and again and again. That being said, I wanted to read a poem that's actually not in the Marshwood songs. I apologize, Black Mountain Press, Marty. I think Marty would like it. It has nothing to do with the truckers' rally, although it is about a trucker. And it's not a particularly political one, but it was written on the way off the 401 to Windsor. And it's a poem that I haven't read anywhere else, and I think it's a good transition to my last one. But it's about truckers and birds off the highway. Galore nest of vale. I miss little birds who scatter like mustard seeds from branch marinas. Open feathered, open road, cable patter in the husk of squally bosom. Oh, little birds, I'd offer you a paper and plastic soup bowl toast, a medieval cauldron for your beak trembles. But the black pepper could gut your little livers. I ain't thinking that Tim's line, but you could be pissing gull wind over a lonesome trucker. And what if you crashed a semi-haul full of soup with nothing but your amorous shit? Would you peck into the soggy pallets as Diesel leaped over his remaining muscles? Is this the cruelty of birds? You lot of birds and men, hauling down the same pine-dotted thread. Brothers and sisters who chase along windmills like Pacho. And what if we forget the weight of great engines, inconceivable to barn swallows? Then sultry necks peek from lover feathers like lot lizards, pressure resonant, but only to the wind. And I think I'd like to end it with essentially a love poem for my home in Windsor, Essex. And it's a poem that I wrote after I kind of understood my friends' faces in the maps of the city. So this idea of physiognomy is this idea that you can kind of see the symbolism through one's face, much like astrology, but applied physically. Unfortunately, it took a dark turn in the 19th century, as many things do of this nature, but the act itself, I took this sort of strange inspiration and began seeing the city in the faces of my friends. So, physiognomy poem. Heckled microwave donor. I'm west side spilling Lucy's for my change. I saw the city curdle, bus wide scrambling praise, my mouth selling goose fat. Animal sick, full of it, a common thief for liver, apples, coffee, organ vitals, a self-checkout bandit, peeling stickers like domes, sliver paint. I'm a fiend with a beard treaded by calipers for measurement over a soft glance calibrated for the shit gray grace of streets like San Francisco. I ensalm a few meter lines under the concrete girdle of broadleaf plantain overpour. Hear ye, there lay some unknown saints whose basal dove ears sent away the earth hollow in slow Orphic digs to a beloved and emanating center, to a ladder of divine ascent, that underneath and upwards appears the nose full moon over Meadowbrook Lane, where the stars capitulate to a heavenly inside, and every friend in this immortal canal wheels along with me. So. Without much hesitation, I'd like to introduce the illustrious Peter Hrastovec. I know, I'm sorry, I might have mispronounced your name, but he's a local legend in many ways. He's a publisher of 4 books. I had the pleasure of actually finally meeting him about 20, 30 minutes ago. He's here to introduce his new book over here, There Will Be Fish. So please pick up a copy of that on your way out, and thank you for the opportunity.
Great to be in the company of young people. I touted this trip to Amherstburg tonight as 3 young writers and an old guy. And so I'm in great company here, and that was wonderful. Big hand for these off to a good start. Well, I'm happy to close the show And afterwards, we're all Black Moss writers. Forgot to mention that Black Moss Press published our books. And as you know, Marty Gervais has published somewhere in the neighborhood of over 600 books in his 50-plus years as a publisher. And he's still going strong. We will wish him many, many, many more years. He's a jewel. He's the Windsor, the Poet Laureate Emeritus. But more than just for Windsor, he's known Canada-wide. And but it's not just about his own writing, it's about the other writers that he nurtures. And this is a fine example that you're seeing tonight. And again, I love the fact that these two gentlemen, to my left here, are starting out, with a book that is being touted by their professor in university. A big hand for Dr. It's how we connect as writers. We have to support each other, and it's just a delight. So my book, There Will Be Fish, it's my third book of poetry, and it's a book that talks about a lot of things. I use the metaphor of fish, there will be fish, because fish, theoretically there's an abundance of fish. We don't know how much fish there is out there, but there's all kinds of opportunity for all of us. And whether you fish by putting the hook in the water, or you're fishing for ideas, the whole notion is that, like, to me, life is pretty extraordinary because there's so many great opportunities. Part of the book, it's divided up into three sections, and I'm going to read a couple of poems from the one section called Jadranka, which is my sister's name, my late sister's name. Jadranka basically means from the Adriatic, the Jadran Sea. Those of you who know about the Adriatic Sea. But I'd been to Croatia, my parents' homeland, a number of times now, and it was approximately 3-4 years ago, before the pandemic, right? My wife Denise is right here, seated next to me here, and we went on a cruise, and the cruise was on a small vessel that had 16 rooms, not staterooms, very small rooms, but perfect for what we were doing. Then this boat was a reconverted Yugoslav army gunboat. And they took off the guns, of course, changed the motors, put in 20 tons of steel, and made this terrific, cruising ship, a small cruising ship that went in and among the islands in Croatia. And this is on the Dalmatian coast. And we would every day the boat would leave port in the morning and would go to a different island. And we'd stop along the way, we'd jump off the boat, we'd swim. There was a little boy on our boat and who did not know how to swim at first. He was afraid of the water. There was 4 sailors on board, including the first mate, and the captain, and a steward. And the other sailors taught the little boy to swim. And it was amazing. By Friday, by the 5th or 6th day at sea, he was just like a fish. It was amazing watching this little boy swim. He was all of 6 years old, it was fantastic. So at the beginning of this cruise, the steward, on behalf of the other members of the crew, said there's going to be a fish dinner if we want it. Now, we would, every day the boat would go into a port and we would have dinner, at the port. But breakfast and lunch was on the boat, but there was no dinner to be had on the boat. You had to leave the boat to have dinner because the crew had their evening. But in the middle of the week, they were going to put on this fish dinner. And this is where they made tips and extra money and so on. They charged us X amount of Croatian kuna for the benefit of having this dinner, and that's how they made a little bit extra money on the side. And but the joke was, is this dinner going to come off, because we didn't know where the fish was going to come from. So the title poem is There Will Be Fish, and this is about that event. There will be fish. When we awoke, the sea had been at work, secreting its oily scents under a searing sun, while gently nudging our buoyant vessel, breezy, unhurried. In the galley of delights, cook reinvents breakfast, while the crew above deck scrub away the daily saline, primed for captain's orders and plotting to pirate their next shore leave. The steward works in solitude, polishing to perfection his family of wine glasses. Sleep sober, I stumble in with my daily query. Hoćeli biti riba? Will there be fish? Not of no, his reply. Of course. Biće riba I veći dio toga. There will be fish, and much of it. This, our ritual. Our unrehearsed shtick, the onboard entertainment on an Adriatic cruise, a bit of stage business, played out by strangers, one with a penchant to annoy, the other compelled to please. Bice riba, he assures, a bounty, a fetid feast, a pledge made by his crew when we first weighed anchor. Fish do not sleep. They keep busy, they travel in groups, share gossip, search for sustenance, security, peace. Their lot is to avoid fishermen, predators, this wily steward, who dives in the dead of night, plunging headlong into the blackened brine, angling to feed the multitude miraculously, with only harpoon in hand and air-laden lungs, diving, disappearing, scavenging in silence. His patient girlfriend, the ship's first mate, bides her time on deck, smoking cigarettes and dreaming of a life with no waiting. The reasons we fish are abundant, ancient. Sport, survival, a coveted pastime. We teach our children to cast, to tie lures, to cut bait. We celebrate the outdoors, the great catch, mount trophies, order seafood by the platter. Oh, there was fish. Much fish, netted in earnest, mackerel and mullet, orada and sardines, bukva and tuna. The whole was cleaned and cooked, garnished and plated with potatoes, Swiss chard, and fed to the hungry, our blessed boatload, all rising in gratitude, applauding this opus, this culinary feast, courtesy of the crew, pleased and proud. There are fish to catch, to nourish, to feed and to fuel visions, stories. We harbor hopes that soar like the sun for a steward, his first mate, for captain and crew, for ourselves, and for a ship drifting between dreams charted like islands. Bice riba, there will be fish, as innumerable as the ripples that signal the unending tempo of the diver's dance. I'm going to step away from Croatia for a moment. I know Gord's here, and he's a big baseball fan, as are a lot of my friends. And this is a poem. It's a memory poem from when I was 11 years old. My parents, being proud Canadians, but from Croatia originally. They were immigrants, like many people came after the war, separated for a few years by the war. They got together, and my sister, and my mother followed my dad. And they came here in 55. I was born in 57, so I'm definitely an accident of history. Aren't we all? My parents had a lovely home, very modest home, didn't have a lot of money, but there was always art, there was books, there was stories, there was music. My mother had the voice of an opera singer. My dad wished he had the money to give her voice lessons so that she can do something more professionally. But she sang beautifully, but there was always, art and culture around us, but not much in the way of sport. Sport was something that I had to do myself, and I loved baseball. And I wanted to go see the Tigers in the worst way. In 1968, of course, they won the World Series, long before '84, which I remember as well too. But '68 was great for me as an 11-year-old. But I didn't get to go see the Tigers until I was 12, when I was a patrol boy at school, and got to work all year to get that free ticket and go on a school bus in June to go to Tiger Stadium. And in those days, you could cross the border you could even have just a library card, right? In those days, you didn't really need all the fancy, stuff that we do now, passports and so on. But it was easy to cross the border. But that being said, I finally got to go see my idol, who was Willie Horton, still is. And Denise and I had the opportunity through the United Way to introduce him at a dinner. It was one of the greatest, moments of my life to be able to introduce Willie Horton to the crowd. And I can still feel the bear hug he gave us afterwards. The guy's just amazing. And a brilliant community person, if you read his history. So this poem is about that experience of going to Tiger Stadium for the first time. It's called I Once Saw Willie Horton. I once saw Willie Horton. He had a grand slam on a warm Saturday afternoon, the air heavy with the smell of hot dogs and spilled beer. I kept Willie Horton in my hip pocket. His face, his arms, his bat. a dog-eared and tattered baseball card worthy of one Harmon Killebrew, a Frank Howard, and 2 bop bottles crammed into a pair of old blue jeans torn at the knees from trying to slide into second base just like him. I knew Willie Horton was big and strong, though he stood that afternoon tiny in the shadows of the grandstand over 400 feet away across a jade sea of grass. I could see Willie Horton from the bleachers, the cheap seats, where we sat sun-baked and anxious so very far away you would think we were in a distant country. I saw Willie Horton in the on-deck circle, beside home plate, swinging at phantom pitches, waiting his turn to declare the strike zone as his own. I knew it was Willie Horton by the way he handled his bat, by the way he waited his turn, the way he played the game, played for the love of the game, played to love and be loved, played because of his love of baseball. It was a thing we shared. All who watched from every seat, all who heard on every radio on an afternoon that was made for myth and magic. I saw Willie Horton take his place at the plate, with the bases loaded, a smile for the catcher, a nod to the umpire, and plain old grit for the pitcher. I saw Willie Horton beam when the crowd began to chant, "Hit the ball, Willie! Hit the ball, Willie! Hit the ball!" I saw Willie Horton's bat connect with the first pitch, sending the ball screaming, ascending rocket-like into the heavens, taking its place with the constellations, defying physics, then descending like a space capsule, hurtling through the atmosphere, a vicious flame streak that tore through the clouds like a storm in summer, a perfect arc that could have been the envy of ancient mathematicians, the ball crashing into the bleachers, a defiant knock on wooden benches, a hard door slammed, a hammer hitting lumber, bouncing firm and bounding high and dropping with precision into the hands of the luckiest person I had ever seen, a wide-eyed kid who could hardly wipe the smile from his face, stuck there, I expect, for the rest of the day and maybe into the next or forever. And I thought, does it ever get any better than that? Of course it did. Later with my own kids, on summer afternoons, with adventures that remained to be written. But it all started when I saw Willie Horton run for home. A year to the day, he stood on a car with the city burning, declaring to those who dared to rebel to go home. Go home and be safe, just like him, running home, to be safe at home, in a kingdom at Michigan and Trumbull, where the bleachers on any warm afternoon was the very place where rainbows and legends begin. Let's go back to Croatia, and this book was designed when I did the manuscript and I gave it to Marty a year ago, this past spring, and I guess we're still in spring, and so about a year ago, and it was just a manuscript. It was a thick manuscript with extra poems that didn't make it in the book. But he has the vision. If you know Marty Gervais, he's one of the most brilliant people that I know. Very humble. You think the wheels are always moving. When you talk to him, when you break bread with him, have a drink, or just meet him on the street. And he had the presence of mind to send this book to a wonderful author by the name of Bruce Meyer. Bruce was the poet laureate of Barrie. He is the author, he himself alone, of well over 60 books. Incredible books, so prolific, it's just amazing. And he was asked by Marty to take my manuscript and just design the book around it. And when I got the book back after Bruce, touched it with his gentle heart and soul, it was a book that I barely recognized. Yeah, I knew the poems, but what he did, a book finally emerged. So what you see here is the work of Bruce Meyer, putting it together and making it neat. So I thank Bruce immensely, as I do Marty. But the poem that I want to read to you is in the sequence, and I mentioned the other icon, my sister. I lost her 17 years ago. She was like a second mother to me. She was the one who taught me about, because she had to, watch me while my parents went to work, and their friends would come over. My mother said, you can bring friends over, just don't, burn the apartment down. It was a one-bedroom apartment, it was really tiny. The friends would come over, and they would spin records, and they would listen to, of course, her beloved Elvis, and Fabian, and early Beach Boys, and she loved Paul Anka. Put your head on my shoulder. That was my sister. Anyways, and she one day taught me all about, she says, we're going to watch Ed Sullivan tonight. There's a band coming on, the Beatles. You're going to love them. God bless her. So when I was in Croatia on this last trip, one of my cousins pulled out a photograph of her, and it was shown to me pretty well in the very spot where she was standing, the Adriatic behind her. So it was her as an 11-year-old girl. So the poem is Jadranka. My sister plays on her beach with an army of cousins, forever 11 and grinning blissfully, her smile calculated to numb a ruptured heart. Salt sea tears sting aging eyes, fixed on a time-worn photo, gently wafting in the calm Adriatic breeze, cooling a boiling land in a blistered soul. The cousins, so much older now, playmates from another century, carefully dip their aging feet in the measured lapping of this fabled shore. They laugh and they splash, and they are children again, and think to look for her beyond the stones and their stories, to where the sea links with the sun. And I'm going to finish up here with another poem about Croatia, and it has again, it's a memory poem on this same cruise, and it gives you an impression. If you ever have the chance to go to Croatia, I mean, there's so many beautiful places in the world, but if you have a chance to go to the Dalmatian coast, you're going to love it. Anybody been the Dalmatian coast here?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Right? You know what it's all about. You know what it's all about. Go back. I intend to. I've got a nephew who's been married in 2 years, so we're hoping. And then one of the places we stopped at was Milna, and it was the one last stop before we went back to the city of Split. So this is my recollection of the morning, and it's a bit of a love poem for my beloved. Waking in Milna. Morning is sardines by the bag, fishing boat fresh. The catch carried to kitchens by generations of women, releasing them for a final swim in the oil of a heated frying pan. At the Wharf Cafe, the coffee pours hot with cold beer chasers. Dispirited old men in their undershirts pull up chairs to debate politics and football, dissecting last night's match and recent elections, grumbling over poor officiating on the soccer pitch and in the parliament. And the bakeries do nothing to suppress seductive aromas seeping from ancient ovens, enticing the shoppers with widened wallets and open shopping bags. The warm loaves faded for butter and jam, a staple, delectable, perfect. The nuns in formation flock to the little chapel overflowing with tourists who will abandon the pews when the service begins, room enough for the holy and their call to prayer. We are docked, refueling our thirsty boat, while the earth continues its whirl, remembering only now that it is Sunday and that rituals run as deep as the sea or your sapphire eyes. Thank you very much. Well, maybe we'll wrap it up. And again, on behalf of all the writers, thank you for coming out here. Thank you again, River Books, for hosting here. Marvelous little bookshop. You're lucky to have something like this right here in your community, this growing, wonderful community of Amherstburg. Thanks for coming out tonight. Clearly, there aren't any Raptor fans here. because you're here instead. But you'll get home in time to watch the balance of the game, I guess, or the NFL draft, or interested in that, or PBS, or whatever interests you. But thank you for coming here, because one of my mottos has always been, live, anything is everything. And to come out and do this, and the opportunity for us to speak, do the spoken word thing, it's glorious. It's been a tough 2 years. And let's all emerge and make it great again. So thanks for coming out, folks. Thanks to Black Moss Press. And again, Julian, thank you. And I'll bring everyone's greetings here to Marty. And he's very grateful that you came out tonight. So thank you, everybody. And you can buy a book.